Welcome to the Garden Talk Salon, where we're featuring Doug Selph with pressed floral art. So as is our custom, I want to say hello and welcome to the Garden Talk Salon. It's sponsored by Dargan Landscape Architects, and we're so glad that y'all are here with us today. You're going to have a wonderful morning hearing from Doug Selph about how he got interested in pressed flowers and started a company called Southern Botanics, which is just about a year old. So let's give him a big applause for being an entrepreneur in the first place. And he and his partner, Austin Davis, have put up together a beautiful array of things for you all to learn from. And before we get started, I thought I'd like for y'all to know a little bit about them. And I want you to know that Austin and Doug live in Brookhaven in Atlanta. And the hobby proved to become a business. And what I understand is that a few years ago, Doug was having his something birthday. And he had just been out to Colorado a little while before that and picked wildflowers and brought them back with him. And then thought they were so beautiful that he framed them and really was intrigued with the art and put them up in the entry foyer to his townhome condominium. And then when the party happened, everybody said, "Wow, what is that? They're so gorgeous." And they wanted him to do them. And with that, it sort of became this great business and this hobby, this passion. And as you can see from these examples, they're the real things. So they're not prints, they're really pressed flowers. And I asked if he learned that in Boy Scouts. He said no.
I was in the 4-H club, so I know how to do demonstrations.
So as is our custom, we would love for you to sign your poster, both of you. We'd love that. Take it away.
Mary, thanks so much for having us today. We really appreciate it. We met Mary, I think it was Labor Day, maybe weekend last year, and when we were up here, and just had not been to her shop before, and wandered in, and just became fast friends. And we kept in touch with her as we were sort of starting our business and developing ideas and whatnot. And she said, "Hey, you need to come out and do one of our garden salon talks," and we ended up sort of coordinating it with the Joy Garden Tour weekend. And thanks to her also, we were able to get in and have a booth at the shops. So these are some things that we have for sale at the booth, and there's a lot more there. I have my two daughters, they're manning it. They better be there. I think they were getting underway at 10, so I shipped them over there, and we came over here. But thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it. I have to do a few caveats. I'm not a botanist or a horticulturalist. I didn't study that in college. I'm actually a lawyer by trade, and that's my day job in Atlanta. I do commercial real estate work. But as Mary said, I did get interested in this and learned about it, and have always been very interested in gardening and the natural world, and just rambling and hiking and looking at studying wildflowers and just appreciating all of that type thing. So it sort of grew into a way to marry that interest with sort of my creative artistic side. I dabble in a lot of different things. I've tried watercolor. I originally wanted to study architecture in college, and so I've always I didn't last long, but I've sort of retained that creative side, and have always looked for different outlets to express that as a hobby and as a way to kind of decompress from work. So now we started this business about a year ago, and have learned a lot in the process, and I wanted to share some of those things with you, because as we all know, we probably have all pressed a flower or a leaf at some point in our childhood, or even as adults. It's something that we all learn in school when we're very young, and our grandmothers may have done it. We may have pictures that our grandmother made. So it's something that's been around a long time. It's something you're seeing a lot more of, I think, in terms of a resurgence. Not long after we had gotten started, I went into the new flagship Restoration Hardware in Buckhead, if you've been to it. And there are botanicals everywhere. In original, pressed botanicals like we do. They say, I think some of theirs are supposedly vintage, Swedish. I guess that's how they can justify the prices they charge. But I don't think all of them are. But anyway, they have an incredible array of that, and so you're starting to see that more. Although it's the kind of thing that's always been around. So I wanted to talk real briefly about kind of the history, because it's an interesting history. As far back as Greek and Roman times, scientists, not scientists because there really wasn't science, but people who were curious about plants and learning more about the properties of plants and how they could use plants, would collect specimens and basically put them between whatever paper they might have, scrolls, things like that, and preserve them for study. And we have examples of this in museums today. And so as early as I think the 1400s, there was in particular in Italy a person who really developed that process of what we now call herbariums, which is a process that's continued in museums today all over the world. And there are very specific requirements and classifications for how you make a museum or a scientific institution quality herbarium. But essentially that's taking the collected materials, the plants, the leaves, whatever the natural material, mounting them to very special paper, and then they go into special boxes and into archival quality preservation areas. That process of making herbariums is sort of how then the hobby or the pastime of doing pressed flowers started from, especially during the Victorian era, as you probably are familiar with. It was a big craze. And at the time, the Victorian era, there was a great fascination with flowers, with the natural world in general. I think as you had greater industrialization in England and in areas like that, then there was more this desire to get out into nature and go to the country, and people would collect the flowers and the other things, and they would bring them back and they would want to preserve them. And obviously a big pastime was to press them and make pictures. And they might be pictures like we do, which are more in the style of a botanical engraving. But another popular thing was to basically to take all the petals off, to take all the leaves off separately, and they would make whole pictures. It might be like a landscape, it might be a seaside or mountains, but it would be entirely made of flower petals or flowers. And then you might have more formal arrangements of like a bouquet of flowers, in a picture. I'm sure you've seen examples of those. Obviously, that people did that in the United States as well during that era. Again, there's been sort of a resurgence of it. It's not hard to go and find in different sources, small presses that you can buy and use for that. But what I wanted to kind of talk about today and to give some examples of was sort of how to do this, in a simple way. It's easy. One thing, it's easy to find the materials that I'm going to use. I mean, you got them at home. You don't have to go out and buy anything special. And it's a nice way to take things from your garden or from a travel or anything like that and incorporate them and have a nice memento when the process is done. So I'll talk a little bit about presses, but I did not have any one to bring and show today, because the ones that we have put together and that we use we've sort of rigged up fairly large ones, as you can imagine, because we do a lot of stuff at one time and we're constantly changing it in and out. And we also will do fairly big things, like we might take a whole banana leaf from a banana tree. We might take a whole leaf, and do that sort of thing. But I will talk a little bit about that and the different processes. So, as I said, one of the things I like to do is collect things here and there when I'm on a trip. Again, as Mary said, I think alluded to, it's good to know what you can pick and what you can't pick. Obviously, you don't want to pick wildflowers somewhere if they're protected. Got to follow the rules. We get a lot of our things, from our own gardens, from friends' gardens. Roadside, if it's clear that it's something that's going to be mowed down, I don't mind picking the flowers, that kind of thing. And really, I'll talk a little bit about what are good things to press and what don't work so well. But my philosophy is I'll try anything once, and I like to experiment with a lot of different things. And there are some techniques that you can use to sort of improve the quality of what you end up with. A word first about when to collect your product that you're going to use. It's always best to try to get out and get it probably midday or just before midday. And in the summer, that could be a little bit earlier. What you want to do is make sure that the flower, is completely dry. So you don't want to pick it first thing when it still has dew on it and it's damp. And ideally, don't pick it until you're actually ready to press it and to go ahead and do it. Because the idea is to get it as fresh as possible and to immediately press it. And that's what's going to preserve, that's what's going to give you the best color, that's what's going to give you the best shape when the things come out. If you cannot immediately press it, like certainly I have gotten things and I can't do it right away, it's fine to put it, in some water. Don't put a lot of water. Just make sure the very kind of bottom's in the water. You don't want it. I usually trim leaves back. If you have leaves that are wet, obviously you're going to want to take those off before you press. And also, I will snip, the bottom that has been in the water off, just so I don't have anything damp then that's being pressed. Another trick that I like is to just take the flower, instead of putting it in water, I'll put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in the refrigerator. And that will keep it fresh. And it doesn't need water. And that can go a couple of days, I've found. So that's another easy thing. So once you have your materials and you're ready to start going, this is a technique that I use when I travel because it's easy, but I also will sometimes use it at home. You can find pretty much anywhere, I'm sure there are some in Cashers as well, just sort of the free magazines, big sort of format magazines. I think this is the Buckhead something or other. I took off the glossy covers, and the paper though is very absorbent, which is nice. It's a newsprint type paper. And what I do is take a piece of newspaper, usually 2 or 3 layers, like about this, fold it in half. You can use, there are special blotter papers you can even buy for this, but quite frankly, newspaper works fine. What you're trying to do is just draw the moisture out of the plant through the pressing process, and the water has to have somewhere to go and be absorbed. Newspaper works fine. Putting the newspaper then into these acts as a further wicking, which is why these things work well.
Join us for parts 2 and 3 of Doug Selph with pressed floral art at the Garden Talk Salon.